Hello everyone, good evening. December 10th is the United Nations Human Rights Day to commemorate the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the United Nations on December 10th, 1948. The United Nations also formulated the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, an International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights in 1966, to reflect the spirit of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. First of all, let's listen to the speech of Dr. Hong Daozi, the Tai Ji Men and the Vice President of the NGO Association of World Citizens on the United Nations Human Rights Day.
Distinguished guests, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, good day. The UN General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights on December 10, 1948, and 2 years later declared December 10th the Human Rights Day. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is based upon human liberty and equality, and the first document in history that details 30 fundamental human rights. It is also the most widely translated document, available in more than 500 languages. Human rights is a universal value that has been recognized as the foundation of freedom, justice, peace, and security, as well as of the sustainable development of human society. Inspired by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the United Nations adopted the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights in 1966. To further clarify and act upon the spirit of human rights, the two covenants and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights combined into the International Bill of Human Rights, the most important human rights bill in the world, and the very foundation of international human rights law. On this important day, we are once again reminded that every human being is endowed with fundamental human rights. No person or public power should infringe or deprive others of their basic human rights. These rights should be respected, protected, and jointly defended. American human rights activist Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has once said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Mr. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, said human rights violations harm us all. Only when human rights are recognized and honored will peace be achieved. Respect for human rights is the common linkage between democratic nations. However, fundamental human rights are violated in many parts of the world. Human rights defenders, following the calling of conscience, are taking to the street and demanding that public authorities respect and protect citizens' civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. The calling of human rights is heard. Everyone is urged to take immediate action for the future of their country. Human rights are at the core of 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainable development cannot be achieved without human dignity. We have to create equal opportunities in order to achieve sustainable goals. We are determined to take actions to protect human rights and remain united as we recover from the pandemic and go beyond into a brighter future. The United Nations is calling on world citizens to stand up for human rights and put human rights in the center of the post-pandemic world, urging social reforms to create an international community built upon freedom and fearlessness with more inclusiveness, resilience, and equality. The world is now full of uncertainties and challenges. Global problems such as war, environmental changes, extreme climate patterns, excessive exploitations of resources, and unequal distribution have provoked the COVID-19 pandemic and Mother Nature to fight back, causing unpredictable and devastating disasters for mankind. In the chaos, human rights are under immediate threat from special interests and corrupt government bureaucracy. The chaos stems from the same root. Michelle Bachelet, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, said there is a vaccine to hunger, poverty, inequality, and possibly, if it is taken seriously, to climate change, as well as to many of other ills that face humanity. The name of that vaccine is human rights. We should properly apply the human rights vaccine to help us build more resilient, prosperous, and inclusive societies. Our common humanity is rooted in human rights, equality, justice, and freedom. These core values need to be reiterated, heard, put into practice. Then the human society will be able to avoid violence and achieve stability and peace. Under the doctrine of cause and effect, just like the rule of heaven and earth, wrongdoers will eventually bear the consequence. To find solutions, it is necessary to go back to the root cause of the problem and change the root cause. Heart is the root cause of our problems. Selfishness causes people to forget the respect between people. True human rights attainment requires basic respect among people. There will be no peace, equality, democracy, and fraternity with no human rights. Human rights comes from conscience. Conscience is the origin of all virtues. Compassion is the footing of morality. Human rights is based upon conscience and love. Humanity is connected with compassion. French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau said a principle of justice and virtue exists in the depth of soul. This is conscience. In recognition that conscience is the key to change the world, the UN General Assembly declared April 5th the International Day of Conscience in 2019. In recognition that love and peace is the most important foundation for sustainable development and mankind's common well-beings, the Federation of World Peace and Love promoted the declaration of International Day of Conscience to urge people to seek win-win solutions with peace and harmony in order to solve national and international crises. All world citizens are encouraged to nurture love in their hearts, to strike a balance in the pursuit of economic, social, cultural, spiritual, technological, and educational development. Conscience is the most needed universal vaccine. On Human Rights Day, we look forward to working with states, organizations, and world citizens to protect, promote, and practice human rights as we meet challenges with creative and effective solutions. On the path to securing universal human rights, we need to have faith, merit, strength, and courage to overcome obstacles as we work hand in hand with like-minded, and to continue the work of securing a human rights-friendly environment. We need to focus on the collective well-being inherent to our conscience. Let's create sustainability and a united world with human rights, dignity, peace, equality, freedom, stability, and happiness. May we all have peace and health. May the world have prosperity and harmony.
Taiwan had been gone through the history of the 228 incident in 1987. It seems to be more democratic. However, the transitional justice has not been implemented yet. Officials have not been administered according to the law. The infringement of the people's basic human rights still exists today. In 1996, prosecutor Ho Kwan-ren had investigated and handled the Tai Ji Men case, and he was cited by the supervisory office for 8 major violations: violations of non-disclosure of the investigation, abuse of power in custody, and even framed imprisonment of racing goblins. Professor Kenneth Jacobson, professor of law in Temple University, spent nearly 2 years studying the Tai Ji Men case. He said, "I don't think I've seen more abuse of the right of due process in any situation than I have seen in the Tai Ji Men tax case. It is not due process to accuse a human being in a civilized society of raising goblins. The mere statement of that will cause individuals to question the sanity of the prosecutor. And in any court of law, such an absurd allegation would be thrown out." The government shouted at the same time to transitional justice. In this way, prosecutors who despise the law and violation of human rights have not been punished. Even more, Ho Kuan-ren had also been promoted to become the deputy director of the Independent Commission Against Corruption of the Ministry of Justice. How can this convince everyone? When the people face such prosecutors, who else can help them get justice? The Tai Ji Men test case is an indicator case of prosecution of human rights. It has been 25 years and still being bullied. The unjust legal tax system is more terrible than the death penalty. The illegal actions of officials have attracted international attention. We hope that the strength of the UN Human Rights Council can overturn Taiwan's unjust legal and taxation system. Let's listen to Mr. Vadi's justice voice on the video.
During these years, we have been able to appreciate the international importance of the UN and what can be achieved with the UN bodies in the defense of human rights. Over the past 4 years at the UN, with the help of the organization present here at this conference today, we have repeatedly denounced the discrimination against minorities around the world. We have brought to the attention of the UN the discrimination of religious minorities in China, such as those suffered by the Uyghurs, a member of Falun Gong, and more particularly the dramatic case of the member of the Church of the Almighty God. Session after session of the Human Rights Council, we organized conferences, made written and oral statements, we held meetings with the state delegation, during which the victims were able to make their voice heard. In June 2021, we brought to attention to the UN Human Rights Council the case of the Tai Ji Men and the injustice they suffer in Taiwan. At this Human Rights Council, we denounced how the tax weapon was used to harm Tai Ji Men. In this statement, we highlighted and denounced the unscrupulous means used by the Taiwanese government in its attempt to destroy the Tai Ji Men movement. The use of tax weapons against spiritual minorities is unfortunately common practices in many countries, including France, which finally, after a struggle to denounce this injustice practice, was condemned by the European Court of Human Rights. In September, at the 88th Human Rights Council session, we renewed our appeal for Tai Ji Men. This time, we highlighted the confiscation of this Tai Ji Men place of worship by the Taiwanese government. This is another form of discrimination, just as serious, because the spiritual community cannot exist without a place of worship. Today, the situation of the Tai Ji Men can no longer be ignored in the world, and the Taiwanese government must allow the Tai Ji Men to enjoy their property, their place of worship, and to make their contribution to world peace without worry. The UN mechanisms allow civil society to participate in the improvement of our society, and it is important to continue to speak out against the unfair treatment of Tai Ji Men by the Taiwanese government. In 2009, Taiwan ratified the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. The ICCPR guarantees fundamental rights for every citizen, as well as freedom of religion or belief. The signing of the International Covenant is of paramount importance, but there is still a step to be taken to implement and respect the commitments made when the Covenant was ratified. The model proposed by the United Nations is a balance between these institutions, the member state, and civil society. In these three components that ensure that the fundamental purposes established in 1945 by the Charter remain at the heart of the United Nations. Taiwan, like all other states, must find this balance with civil society and grow with it, not against it. It is in fact the struggle of the Tai Ji Men that we support so that justice is done to them, so that their contribution to a better, peaceful, and harmonious Taiwanese society is recognized. Thank you for your attention.
Mr. Thierry Valley calls on the Taiwan government, which has signed the ICCPR and ICESCR, to implement the content of the two conventions. On December 4th, Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen mentioned in her speech at the 2021 World Human Rights Day ceremony held at the National Human Rights Museum of the Ministry of Culture that Taiwan, a democratic country, will not only remember the lesson of authoritarian history, but also be willing to ensure the current democracy and freedom of human rights. I also hope that the government can take action to implement what she said that day, and really take action to fix the human rights prosecution issue in Taiwan. The unreasonable treatment in the Tai Ji Men case is a general case. Some taxation victims like Tai Ji Men are crying secretly. Let's listen to their stories.
If the National Tax Bureau wants to set you up, it's very easy. They would just come and inspect your tax, and you're doomed.
The total amount of money is more than US 600,000, simply with a sheet of tax bill. Tax bureaus inform you how much you owe.
The government just kept adding tax. Up to date, I need to pay US $2.5 million. In order to pursue redress through litigation, I already paid more than US $1.4 million. Now I barely have faith in this government. Ministry of Finance's torture, evil, and illegality is the scariest stuff than anyone else. For Taiwanese survival, the fight against the abuse of Ministry of Finance. My son will continue to fight when I die, and even my grandson will continue when my son dies.
The National Tax Bureau suddenly sent me the unexpected tax bills in total more than US $3.9 million. Because of the case, I could not sleep for consecutive 6 months. For several times, I even wanted to jump off from the building. During that time, when I appealed to the Deputy Minister of Finance, Zhang Shanhe, he even came up with an excuse. If I don't find you, you will join up with the inheritance. My inheritance ran away, how could I join up with them? In addition, this case is assigned by the Court of Application of NTB. How I join up with them? That would mean helping you solve the problem. You even revenge on me. What kind of mentality it is? This, I think, reflects his real idea, the assumption of citizens as slaves.
I was fined more than 35,000 US dollars, just like that. The nightmare has been haunting me for 10 years. This is unacceptable all my life.
The biggest blow in my life is the tax laws in our country, which first drives people to hell. They negotiate the amount by deducting or adding. If someone dare to go through this and shoulder the burden, I would highly admire him, a miracle for not committing suicide.
My deal purchase fell apart, but the National Taxation Bureau added all the unpaid tax of seller onto me. My life is gone. I got nowhere to seek help. I had depression, now even cancer, but the National Taxation Bureau still keeps chasing me for money. I don't have any more money. More than US 35,000 is already a huge amount for me. I have exhausted all that I could do. I have been unemployed for 30 years because of the illness. The tax, just like they push a knife on my neck. How could I survive? I am on the verge of death, and the government still doesn't let me go. Please help me. It's been more than 20 years. I cannot take it anymore. The government still wants money from me. It's killing me. I want my justice.
Each invention patent costs 10 to 14,000 US dollars to obtain. Within 10 years, I have obtained 1,600 patents, and the president said that he wanted to reward me and suggest me price my patent in exchange of capital, such as technology investment to industrialize my research. Following his advice, I select one patent and price it. Originally, my company was 1.8 million US dollars. Then the capital was increased to 10.8 million US dollars due to my technology investment. But what happened? By the end of the year, I was asked to pay 5.4 million US dollars in taxes. I protest. I didn't even sell my shares. Why tax me? That was very unfair. I suggest, how about use my shares as collateral? The National Tax Bureau refused as they thought my stocks were worthless. They seized all my property, real estate, all my bank deposits, and auctioned them all off. So I now have nothing.
You tax officials should fix it when you know something's wrong, rather than threaten citizens to hire a lawyer to sue me. It's like saying, yes, I buy you, I bully you. What can you do?
I asked the director of the NTB immediately, within 1 week, to refund me the incorrect tax money of 35,000 US dollars.
They said the fine is 20 times the amount you owe. Who decides that? The National Tax Bureau does. Who decides how much back taxes you owe? The NTB does. And if you don't accept, they will audit your tax records for 10 years.
Since the company want to avoid trouble, we have no choice but to surrender. Most of the times, we pay up around US dollars 1.7 thousand to 2.5 thousand to satisfy NTB's requests.
The tax agency came to my office to inspect tax and asked me to make it up with more than US dollar 71,000. During the process, the amount was negotiated down to US dollar 10,000. Because we don't dare to go against government authority, we can only obey and pay up the US dollar 10,000 tax money.
The district officer told me, "You have the highest profit in my district, so you can pay a little bit more." I've never evaded taxes. Why do I have to pay a little bit more for less tax?
A tax official came to me unexpectedly and asked me to pay the additional amount of $7,000. 1 week later, he visited me again and said, I submitted your case to my superior. He said it was unacceptable because this amount is way too little. He said my boss said that there should be one more zero at the end of the number. That is, the amount went from $7,000 to $72,000.
We did have transactions with them. The NTB only informed me 5 years later that the entity we traded was a paper company and came to find us instead of that paper company for VAT tax. It's very unfair. After paying the additional VAT tax, my boss closed down the company. It had been hard to maintain the business. He didn't want to live under such taxation threat.
The NTB issued me a 5-year tax bill on the reasons that my store's signboard does not match the registered company name.
He insisting on imposing the tax. I then went to litigation. I was plagued by multiple mental and physical illnesses during the 5-year proceeding.
The NTB discretionarily carry out inspection on all my previous tax returns. If there's an error, I'll be fined. I've already been fined twice.
My mother-in-law's name was Lin Wang Yue. When she saw this tax bill, she was shocked. My parents-in-law were honest and law-abiding people. They always paid their taxes, so she just returned the bill. But 1 year later, the same tax bill came back. Obviously, my mother-in-law was a lady, but the Lin Wang Yue on the previous tax bill was a guy. This time, the gender, address, and ID number were all changed to my mother-in-law's information, so the tax bureau could force her to pay. Every year, my mother-in-law was haunted by the same tax bill. She passed away in 1996, and I received a court enforcement notice in 2001. It was really scary. We have suffered so many years as a family, yet those corrupt bureaucrats walked away without consequences. They don't admit their wrongdoings and keep repeating their mistakes. They should be rightfully punished.
The company accepted my technology investment because they wanted my technical skills, and this was approved by the Ministry of Economic Affairs. A year and a half later, the National Taxation Bureau replied me saying, "Sorry, this is not a technology investment, this is salary income." They asked me to pay more than $144,000 in taxes. I went to file a review and went through the administrative litigation. I also filed a litigation to the administrative court then. Of course, they turned down my request and I lost the case. They took all my money from my bank account first and sent me a notice, and then also restrict me from leaving the country. I cannot go abroad. My ex-wife was unable to comprehend the situation, so we divorced. Of course, the children have been in the United States since.
My house was auctioned off because of 2 unpaid traffic tickets of $648. On March 30th of this year, I was informed to hand over my house by the clerk. It was then that I learned my house was being auctioned off. I have no idea from the beginning, and suddenly I received the bad news.
In 2016, I received a notice from the NTB that informed me to pay the luxury tax. My husband and I have only one house registered under our name, and we move into it within the required period. Why do we need to pay the luxury tax? Every time we try to check with the NTB, they simply use various regulations to convince us to pay the tax of more than $180,000. If we refuse, we will be asked to pay nearly $360,000 with fines included.
Because he couldn't make money. He went to work in China. It was then the NTB said that we earn more than $40 million and imposed a tax bill of over $1.8 million. As a result, my husband couldn't come back because he would be restricted from leaving Taiwan. One of my kids was 1 year old then and the other 3. My older kid is now 10 years old. 7 years! My husband has missed the family time of 7 years to be with my kids and me in Taiwan just because of a single wrong tax bill. They definitely knew it was a wrong bill, and yet they are unwilling to correct it.
The Taxation Bureau adopts a very simple approach when imposing taxes. They are the boss. After taxpayers receive a tax bill and declares, "This is not mine, it's not my tax, and there is something wrong with the bill," then how does NTB respond? NTB simply just asks people to prove it. Prove it if you can, otherwise you have to pay.
My land has been expropriated by you, and you still ask me to pay taxes? It doesn't make sense. I will pay the tax if you return the land back to me.
We were not informed that we owe taxes, but our house was sealed. Even the final ruling of criminal court could not stop NTB from pursuing the taxation. So my salary is extra. They took away all my money from my bank account. Now there's barely a penny left.
Taiwan still has a long way from being a country that human rights are truly respected. Everyone needs to constantly remind the government to make reforms. Single strengths may be small, But when everyone gathers, there will be strong enough to overcome everything. All obstacles encountered will become nutrients for future growth. Finally, I would like to use the song Human Rights for Everyone to encourage and invite you to keep caring about the reform of human rights in Taiwan and the future. Thank you.